8-year-old girl found lifeless in home. Then police find journal that reveals the shocking truth. This is the story of Giselle Ford, a young woman with a big heart and even bigger dreams. It is a story that everyone should see and one that unfortunately is real. Ford's sad tale also represents the hundreds of thousands of other children who are forced to suffer every day at the hands of those who are supposed to love them, protect them, and keep them safe. It is a cry for help that no one will be able to ignore, because as soon as you learn all that this poor girl has endured, you too will feel bad and want to do something about it and make this world a fairer place. For Giselle, there was no happy ending. No one helped her, even when there was obvious evidence that something very bad was going on. It was a real tragedy. But I hope that her story will serve as a wake-up call so that no other child is to suffer the same fate and we start to change the rules of the game. Like many other children, Giselle Ford, just 8 years old, was a happy, curious, and intelligent child. She loved school and was good at making new friends. For her, going to class was the best part of her day. It was her refuge and a place where she could be herself in freedom. She knew that as long as she was at school, she would not be afraid and that no one would hurt her. A somewhat strange feeling for a girl her age, but one that you will understand without any problems later on, when she tells you the chilling truth about her family. Jizzy, as she was known to her friends, wrote in a rainbow-striped journal, but the pages of her diary were not adorned with the innocent stories of most children her age. The truth revealed in the 8-year-old's diary was one that uncovered shocking events and heartbreaking tragedy. The girl's mother had died during childbirth, leaving Gizzy to grow up alone with her father, Andre Ford, who was bedridden from a rare degenerative disease, and her strict grandmother, Helen Ford, a reserved woman whom no one really knew and who had a very bad reputation among the neighbors, who feared rather than respected her and avoided any interaction with her and the family. Her grandmother Helen was the head of the family. She took care of everyone and was in charge of everything around the house. Nothing could be done without her supervision. She was in charge of all medical care for her only child and the education and care of her granddaughter. Helen was known to be a strong-willed woman with whom you don't want to argue, something her daughter quickly understood. In fact, whenever Giselle was seen with her grandmother on the street, the little girl remained completely silent, waiting for her grandmother to tell her what to do. Financially, the only official income coming into the Ford household came from the widow's allowance Helen received from the state after her husband died. Her husband was Gerald, and he was a well-known Texas lawyer who died under strange circumstances more than 15 years ago. Doctors ruled that Gerald died of a severe allergic reaction to something he ate, but no one believed this story, and to this day there are still too many questions surrounding the event. Otherwise, apart from the grandmother's bad temper, which had no reason to indicate that there was any sign of criminality in the house, the Fords seemed like a normal family with an ordinary life like any other. Unfortunately, however, the pages of Jizzy's diary, which the police would later find during their investigation, revealed a completely different and unimaginable story. The reason why little Jizzy is not currently in this world and why we are here today telling her story. The events we're talking about took place on July 12, 2013, when Giselle Ford, or Jizzy to her friends, was found dead in her grandmother's filthy, vermin-infested home in Austin, Texas. The news hit the community hard, and they couldn't imagine that such a thing could happen. They knew it was a complicated family, strange in some ways, but no one could have guessed the hell the little girl was living in there. The autopsy would later reveal that the girl had suffered a long and agonizing death. According to sources close to the police, the girl had been repeatedly beaten badly, something that could be deduced from the number of bruises and scars on her body. However, it was not the beatings that killed her. The official cause of Giselle's death was strangulation, possibly with a rope. Her hands and ankles showed signs of having been tied for hours, and from the scars on her wrist, there was no doubt that the girl had suffered such abuse on other occasions. Finally, the corpse also had a wound on the back of her neck infested with maggots, possibly a deep cut inflicted with a very sharp knife, similar to those used to cut meat. That woman had evil in her eyes. I always told my wife when he passed in front of her house. She would tell me that I was exaggerating, but it has become clear that I was right. It was a terrible event that we all could have avoided, said one of the Ford's neighbor to the local newspaper that covered the news of the girl's murder. No one could imagine that the little girl was being tortured, absolutely no one, least of all by her relatives. But she was. Jizzy went to school every day as if nothing was wrong. In fact, she was a laughing child and her teachers liked her very much for her dedication and good behavior. It was very difficult to deduce that she was going through family problems of that magnitude. Giselle could have been anything she wanted to be in life. She had the skills to go far academically. She always turned in her homework on time and had never gotten less than a B on her exams. She was an excellent student who would have gone far. It's terrible to know what she had to put up with when she got home, yet she could still come to class and give you the best of smiles. She was a lovely little girl and she'll be greatly missed. One of her teachers at the school told one of the reporters from the Texas News Channel in tears. But if the autopsy report was not devastating enough, the evidence that came to light later during the trial of her murder ended up freezing everyone's hearts. As we explained at the beginning of this story, the girl had a beautiful diary in which she liked to write every day her experiences and feelings. And unlike what we could imagine, among the pages of that diary was not a single happy page. The diary was full of notes in which the girl made clear what her situation was. Each page seemed to be taken out of a horror novel. The police revealed that they also found video footage recorded on the father's cell phone, making him an accomplice to everything his mother put his daughter through. Between her diary and her father's cell phone videos, it became abundantly clear that Giselle endured a painful and loveless existence, in which she was forced to do squats as punishment and stand for hours daily, even depriving her of food and water for hours at a time. The girl endured the unbearable. If she made a noise, a sock was forced into her mouth to shut her up. If she spoke without permission or asked any questions, her grandmother would make her kneel down and tie her wrists and ankles with bridles. She would leave her in that position for hours, forcing her to remain completely silent until she decided to let go. Something really heartbreaking that was happening in broad daylight and only a few meters away from her neighbors, but no one ever managed to do anything to stop it. On July 11, 2013, Jizzy wrote her last diary entry 2 days before the police found her dead body. "I hate this life, I'm in big trouble and I can't run away, I think this is the end," wrote the girl in irregular strokes that denoted the fear and anguish she was feeling in doing so. But the saddest thing was not to discover all the girl that was suffering, but to see that despite the hell she was living every day and the fear she felt, in the diary she kept writing about her dreams and hopes, and about everything she managed to do in life, such as her love for school and jumping rope with her classmates. "I'm going to be smart and good young lady. I'd love to become a teacher," Jizzy wrote in early 2013. "People say I'm smart, brave, and pretty. I don't want to let them down. I'll study hard to go far and get into a good university." Knowing that that poor innocent soul still had the hopes of having a happy life makes it even more difficult to assimilate everything that happened afterward. Luckily, justice fulfilled its mission, and after an arduous investigation that lasted almost a year, it was determined that the main culprit of all that barbarism was Helen Ford, and that her son, the father of the girl, was complicit in everything despite his unfortunate state of health. Although Jizzy's father could not be punished as he deserved because he died of the serious illness he suffered before the case was taken to court, the grandmother did not suffer the same fate. Helen Ford, 55, was prosecuted by Judge Evelyn Clay, who did not even try to hide her indignation at the abuse she had inflicted on her poor granddaughter. The judge wanted to set a precedent with this case and agreed the maximum possible punishments. "This murder was torture," Clay said according to a report shared on People.com. "That girl suffered a slow and agonizing death. That little body seemed to have been pulverized from head to toe. The treatment you gave to that girl was evil, Mrs. Ford. Such an inhuman act only deserves the worst punishment. For people like you, there is no redemption." The judge sentenced during the trial, which the grandmother was convicted. According to the Chicago Tribune, Jizzy's beautiful handwriting in his diary had become an irregular scribble that indicated a feeling of fear. This was also taken into account during the trial, since through the pages of the newspaper you could clearly see the evolution of the girl's mood, seeing clearly how in her last entry she was very scared and erratic, something unusual in a young woman with excellent academic skills and who wrote in an impeccable way. Later, the court that was handling this case also discovered that the judicial system had defrauded this beautiful girl and that he had not acted as required by regulations. Since a family services investigator had visited Giselle's home about a month before her death, warned by one of her neighbors that he distrusted the grandmother's attitude, but no action was taken. Even a doctor specializing in child abuse came to examine the girl, but he never reported a suspicious injury that he observed, according to the court. Finally, after analyzing all the evidence and almost a year after Jizzy's death, Helen Ford was sentenced to life imprisonment for murder. Rarely had this sentence been applied to a woman in the state of Texas, but the seriousness of the case required exceptional measures to create precedent. A punishment that will not bring little Giselle back to life, and that if the system had acted as it should, it could have been avoided. Now we can only remember Jizzy with affection and pray for her soul to find rest. No one deserves to go through what she went through, let alone a child. Life can be really unfair, and stories like these remind us of it. Did you like this sad and surprising story? If so, we invite you to leave us a comment expressing your opinion. If you want to continue enjoying stories like this one, subscribe to our channel or check out the other videos shown at the bottom of the screen. Thank you for your cooperation.